Hi there, this is Ted M. Young, also known as Jitter Ted. Welcome to the series of recordings from my live coding series where I'm developing KidBank, the money tracker for kids. This is episode 5, where I focus on prettifying the user interface by making the list of transactions nicer. And that's pretty much all I do in this episode, so if you're not interested in me fumbling around with HTML and CSS, then you can skip this episode and tune in next time. Otherwise, enjoy. The plan for today, from last time, we have most of the features we need other than persistence. And so I thought instead of blasting through to persistence, it would be a good idea to actually deploy it. So Heroku is going to be my first target for deployment, mainly because it's so darn easy. Then once that's up and working, then we can, the other thing I wanted to do was make the UI a little prettier. So I was playing around with, one thing I forgot to do yesterday, that's kind of funny. I didn't drag the doing to done. That's kind of like the best part of getting something complete. So let's see. So we're first going to work on some styling, if I can find my, so this is what I came up with. I have to fix the color, because when I was designing the color, I had so basically the background color for here was a little too green. It looked better when I had flux night mode, which reduced the blues, so it looked less blue. So let me play around with that color. That's that one. So it's a bit too green. Let's drop down the green a bit. Now it's just gray. Switch around and add more blue. Yeah, that's kind of nice. Okay, so this is basically a mock-up of the layout of what I want. The app, which I guess I need to run again. Okay, so that's running. There we go. So this is the page. So what I want to do is the balance stuff here and the transactions I want to replace with this much nicer looking thing. So I mocked it up in CodePen. So this is fairly responsive up to a certain point where if you squeeze it too much, you're going to get some wrapping, which isn't horrible because actually we're not actually displaying these as cash deposit or interest credit, but actually deposit or payment. And I've set it up so that it's right aligned for the amount, so that way the decimals line up. Because I think the numbers for this font that I'm using, which is Nunito, is the numbers are monospaced. What we want to do is go into our template, which is currently a single monolithic template, which at some point later today we'll separate out into, certainly pull out the import, because that's something that you will likely do maybe once. We'll leave the deposit and the spend money. We'll also prettify those later, but right now we're going to focus on basically the balance and the transactions. So let's close the run window. Actually, let's just stop it because that'll make it easier. So again, let's take a look just at the app. Let's again use the import for pulling in a bunch of transactions. So let's pull in these transactions. We'll hit import. And uh-oh, did something break? Oh, hello, I actually stopped it. All right, well, we know what it looks like, so let's get on to this template. So basically I have HTML and CSS, so what I want to do is basically take all the CSS, and this goes, so we're using Spring Boot which is basically Spring. We're using the 2.1 line of Spring Boot, which matches with the Spring 5 framework. And we're using for the view, we're basically using Timeleaf. I don't know of any other one that's really popular. Timeleaf is the one. And so anyway, the way the resources work, so we have account balance and a template, because at runtime that's going to get replaced with the appropriate stuff. All right, that's what these TH things are. But what we want is to load up CSS, and the CSS isn't going to be processed by Timeleaf. It's just a static file, so we're going to put it here. So we'll go and create a new file, and this will be our app.css. kid bank. And we'll just paste this stuff right in. And now we need to reference the CSS file. So we'll do that here. God, I always blank on how to include CSS, so yeah, I feel silly for embedding that. So let's do this. I always like Treehouse. Okay. So we'll grab that. It's a link, and we're linking to KidBank CSS. If I remember correctly, the stuff that's in static will end up being at the root. Let's just be sure that I have that correct. So let's go to localhost, and we'll actually reference the KidBank CSS directly, and there it is. Okay, so that's basically at the root relative to the page. So even though these are in different directories when they're in resources, so KidBank is under static, and the HTML account balance template is under templates, and that's under resources, eventually that gets all crunched up into basically the root of the site. Okay, so now if we basically go just to this, we'll see actually we're getting a little bit of styling already. And let's paste this and import, and unknown transaction type deposit. All right, well, it looks like we've got a bug. So let's see what happened. Unknown transaction type deposit. Oh, so it's possible I have something that was just called deposit rather than cash deposit. So let's take a look. What did I have here? So this one. So I had one of the entries had just the word deposit instead of the word cash deposit. So what we can do is just add another case statement. First we need a failing test. So let's do, let's go and do a failing test for this. So these are all working ones. So what I'll do is when I do multiple deposits, I'm going to call one of these just deposit. And so right now, so before I do that, this will, these tests should pass. May as well run all the unit tests. They run so quickly, there's no point in not running all of them. All right, they all pass. So now I'll basically change this to just be deposit. And now I expect it to fail because it didn't recognize deposit as a transaction type. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to improve this error message just a bit, because what's unclear is it says unknown transaction type deposit. When I'm reading this, I'm not sure, is that somewhere it was trying to do a create deposit method call and it didn't work? Or was it, I mean, we see it's in the CSV importer, but it'd be useful to have a slightly better error message. So during CSV import, was not expected. So that seems kind of better. So let's run that now and see if we get a better error message. Good error messages will save you hours of debugging. Okay, so during CSV import, transaction type was not expected. The other thing we can do is actually display the whole transaction type. One thing you might have to be careful of in terms of errors if you're ever throwing it and logging it is that be careful that you're not exposing any dangerous or private information. These are just deposits. I mean, I don't think that's a problem for our application, but it would be something that you might have to consider, like the actual transaction that failed. If somebody could get into the logs, they might be able to figure, but if they get in to see the logs in this case, then I'm hosed anyway. So one thing that's interesting is right now we're throwing an illegal argument exception. We could be throwing our own exception. The other thing we can do, because what I really want to do when I have this error is not just say that, hey, deposit wasn't known, but give me more information about which transaction was not understood. I get most of that in anyway because it just parsed it, but it might be really nice to see the actual full line of the CSV that was problematic. So we would have to catch the exception here. I think for now, I'm going to put that as a to-do. There we are. Add more error reporting during CSV import failure. Show the original line of CSV that failed to provide more context. Okay, so let's go back to our CSV importer for transaction dated, and then we can throw in the local date time. Okay, so if we run our tests, we should see the better error message also telling us the date of the transaction that failed. And there it is. So that's all cool. All right, so now let's go fix this. So we can handle case deposits. And that should fix it. Boom. Okay. So let's go ahead and commit that. Fixed bug, fixed problem, not handling, fixed not handling as the transaction type from CSV import. I want to make sure not to check these things in because that's not actually part of this commit. So I'll leave those, okay. I said committed. There we go. All right. Now let's restart the app. So let's go here. Control Option R is the awesome pop-up that lets me select what I want to run. So it restarted the app because I had set the configuration. Remember from last time I had set the configuration for the application that it's single instance only. And that's this thing in the upper right here. So that way it makes sure that I'm only running one of them because I never want to run more than one, at least certainly not locally. All right, so now that that's up and running, if I do import now, so we've got most of the styling that we wanted. So remember we want it to look something like this, although I guess wider. So that looks good. I don't even know if we need the word transactions, but I'll leave it there. And now we want the balance to be formatted like this. So the way that is basically the word account balance is just in an H3, and then the balance itself is inside of an H1. So, and that's inside of a header. So basically copy that, go over to our template. I'm going to just change the title, kid bank balance. Okay, so here we now have header. So we want to take away the word balance here. We don't need it. This is a span. So technically we could just fit the span in here like that. The shorter way would to be actually just put it as part of the H1 like this. So let's just do that. No need to have extra tags if we don't need them. Do that. I'm going to change this to an H3 to see what that looks like. Okay, well, we'll we'll do a sudo recompile to get time leaf to reload the thing. Yeah, so transactions, now that it's sitting here, is kind of not needed. So why don't we just pull it out? Okay, well, so that worked really well because the CSS that I created was specifically designed for a table with TRs and THs and so on. I'm going to change this to description. And we'll refresh the page. And so that looks much better. The blue is a bit on the dark side. So let's just do a slight cleanup on the CSS and make that a bit lighter. Because when there's so much of it, it didn't look as bad when it was just less of it. So let's make it a bit lighter. So, well, 0.4. Let's try 0.4. So that's the header background. That's 0.4. Go back here, reload. Yeah, that's nice. Okay. And looks like, oh, I didn't notice this before. So we've got date, action, amount, description. We actually want to reverse these columns because we want the amount all the way to the right. The other thing is we probably want to set a maximum width on this because it's just too wide. So first let's fix the actual problem, which is that the columns are in the wrong order. So let's move that down and that down. And we'll reload that, and there we go. So that looks much better. Yeah, so let's take a look at what the width is for, so we set the body basically 75, and we want, I should probably have at least a bit of margin. Because I know on my iPad, not having a margin at all looks really weird. Okay, that looks pretty good. So we've got nice striping on the table, reverse chronological order. We still have our funky, huge form down here, but we'll fix that later. So let's say we want to deposit $200 because he just got that as a birthday gift plus holiday gift. Since his birthday is around the holiday, we deposit it, and boom, it has the right amount. Cool. All right, let's go back to our story. I haven't checked. Oh, I guess I should check to see how it looks on the phone. So let's go into, so responsive. It's probably not very responsive because I set the width to 60%. And so if I have like an iPhone 6, that's going to be a little hard to read. Maybe I'll just leave the width at 100%. Because probably most of the time I'm going to be accessing it on the phone. So let's make sure it works well on the phone. Yeah, so that's better. And what does it look like on my iPad? Looks good on the iPad. And if I happen to, if he's looking at it on his phone, which is about the equivalent of an iPhone 5, probably have to play around with the fonts. So I don't know how I have the font set up. I'm gonna have to do some offline research on some recommendations here, but I think it's okay for now. So it's pretty wide on a desktop, but I think that's okay. Not terribly experienced at doing responsive without doing some Googling. So I will spare you the Googling, and we're going to call this story done. I feel like I need a little sound effect to say, hey, done. All right. So the next thing is to, where is it? So deploy to the cloud. All right, let's be specific here. We're going to be deploying to Heroku. Make view balance prettier. So there's additional stuff that I want to do to make view balance prettier. Like there's some mock-ups that I've got that I want to do a bit more. Because what I'd like to do is, for example, so like this mock-up, what I like about this is basically instead of having 4 columns, it sort of combines those 4 columns into 2 segments, one on the left and one on the right, and sort of emphasizes the description or name of thing. So the way I was picturing it is that this would be the equivalent of 4 columns in the table. The amount would be as you see it in this mock-up. This would be the date of the transaction. This would be the type of the transaction, so deposit or payment. and this would be what it was for. There's another mock-up where they color this, so instead of having it black, it's green for income and red for spending, so I'd probably do that as well. That's this mock-up. So this one, strangely enough, this mock-up, which is supposedly for like finance stuff, has no decimals. So the only thing I can figure is the designer is in a country where currencies don't have decimals. So like, Japanese yen, you don't have decimals because everything is whole numbers. Anyway, so this is the one where basically it uses green and red to indicate whether it's a payment, basically spending money or income or expense. So I kind of like that coloring. I am one of those, I guess, unpopular opinion that I don't like dark mode. So I like white mode, especially in my phone apps. So that make view balance prettier is basically talking about that. This was sort of minimal styling just to make it nice. What else? We're on deploy app to Heroku. So unfortunately, there's no audio for the part of the episode here where I deploy to Heroku and do some of the initial setup stuff for the persistence. So if there's enough demand, then I may redo the deployment part. But to be honest, it was actually really straightforward, and this part of the episode was only about 10 minutes. So you didn't really miss much. Okay, thanks for watching.